It was March 1970. The war was officially winding down. American troops withdrawing, peace talks whispered in Paris. But out here on the border, no one had told the jungle. The air itself felt heavy, thick with humidity and rot, and the quiet dread of men who'd been fighting for too many years on foreign soil. Time had lost its meaning. Survival was measured not in months or days, but in each footstep through the vines, and each breath held at the crack of a twig. Officially, we had no business in neutral Cambodia. If we left footprints here, Washington would deny they were ever ours. Unofficially, we went where the war's darkness spilled over. And it was spilling over tonight. That was when Captain Walker handed me the sealed orders. The envelope felt damp in my hands despite the heat. In plain text, it laid out a mission no one would ever admit. Cross the border, locate missing equipment, destroy all evidence. No deviations, no records, no promise of extraction. If you're caught, Walker said flatly, you were never there. I glanced at the 6 men gathered in the clearing. My squad, though we wore no insignia, carried no unit badges, not even dog tags. We were ghosts already. I struck a match and burned the paper to ash, watching the last coordinates blacken and curl in my palm. By the time the flame died, I understood. This mission wasn't about victory or even survival. It was about secrecy at all costs. We were being sent to bury something, maybe an enemy secret, maybe our secret. And if we had to, we were expected to bury ourselves with it. We slipped across the Cambodian border that same night, 7 shadows threading through a wall of thorns and towering teak. The jungle swallowed us in one breath. Enormous trees loomed overhead, their branches blotting out the moon and casting twisted shadows on the forest floor. Every step was a quiet battle against the terrain. Slick mud underfoot, vines snaring our arms, clouds of mosquitoes drawn to our sweat. After a few hours, even the insects fell into an eerie silence. It felt as if the jungle was holding its breath. I caught Sergeant Ramirez making the sign of the cross whenever a stray breeze hissed through the bamboo. To break the tension, Private Ellis muttered a joke about spooky Cambodia and how the ghosts must be thick as the mosquitoes out here. No one laughed. We all knew the stories. Just a week ago at base, a radio operator swore he heard voices coming through the static at dusk. Vietnamese voices crying, moaning like the dead. Operation Wandering Soul, the PSYOPs guys called it blasting eerie recordings to mess with enemy minds. But alone in the jungle, we weren't sure if the cries we heard were ours or theirs, living or dead. As we pushed deeper, I could almost hear them now. A faint, strangled sob carried on the wind, a rustling in the canopy that sounded like whispered words. Captain Walker marched on at point, eyes fixed forward as if following an invisible path. Our point man was a Montagnard scout named Yiba, a wiry, barefoot tribesman who moved with uncanny silence. He suddenly halted, raising a clenched fist. We froze. Yiba knelt and touched a dark stain on a broad leaf. Blood, still tacky. My heart thumped. Walker motioned us down and we fanned out slowly. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw more signs. Broken branches, a discarded pack. Then, catching the light, a single black boot partially sunk in the mud, empty. It belonged to no one in our squad. Walker's jaw tightened. Spread out. Find the rest. We found it strewn through the undergrowth. 3 more boots, an M16 rifle with no owner, a trail of blood drops leading into a stand of elephant grass. No bodies. It was as if a whole patrol had walked out of their shoes and vanished. I felt the hairs on my neck rise. There were rumors among the Marines of a ghost patrol that went missing outside Quezon. Men here one moment, gone the next, lost in fog and legend. Staring at those empty boots, I wondered if we'd just stumbled into another. Could be VC ambush, Corporal Nguyen whispered. He was our South Vietnamese translator, and even he sounded unconvinced. There were no shell casings, no sign of struggle. Ramirez muttered Ma, the Spanish word for ghost. No one corrected him. Walker's voice cut the silence. We keep moving, eyes open. He refused to acknowledge how wrong this all felt. I could sense the unease rippling through the squad. This was someone else's gear, and by the look of it, they'd been Americans. Another team had been out here, maybe the same mission as us, and now they were gone without a trace. I thought of the blood trail, of footprints that simply ended. I swallowed the copper taste rising in my throat and followed Captain Walker into the trees. Behind us, the jungle reclaimed whatever we'd found, leaving nothing but silence. By midnight, we'd set up a hasty camp in a hollow between strangler fig roots, 20 miles past a border that we had never crossed. The men spoke in whispers, if at all. Private Ellis kept checking our rear as if expecting those vanished soldiers to stumble in, barefoot and bleeding. Yaba, the montagnard, sat apart from the rest, a small fire crackling between us. He produced a worn charm, a tuft of feathers and carved bone, and tied it to our makeshift lean-to. Ramirez watched him, lips pressed tight. Finally, Ramirez asked in a hush, "What's that for?" Iba's dark eyes lifted to meet his. "Spirits," he answered in halting French, which Nguyen translated. "Bad place. Angry souls here." No one joked this time. I remembered what we'd read in the cultural briefings. Many who died violently far from home became wandering souls, unable to pass on. And this jungle had seen so many violent ends. No sooner had we eaten a cold meal of canned rice and sat back to rest than the radio on Nguyen's hip emitted a burst of static. We all flinched. Radios were supposed to maintain silence unless absolutely necessary. Nguyen hurried to mute it, but a voice cracked through the static, low and distorted. "Mayday, any unit, copy." We all stared. Walker snatched the receiver. "This is Raven Team, over. Identify yourself for a moment, only static." And then we heard it clearly, an American voice trembling. "We, help, God." The rest dissolved into a high-pitched whine. My blood went cold. Could it be one of those missing men trying to reach us? Walker's face was impassive. "Repeat, identify," he barked. Only static replied. Then just before Nguyen shut it off, a final whisper crackled through. "They're here, with us, beneath," and a shrill burst cut off the words. We sat in stunned silence. Corporal Nguyen looked like he'd seen a ghost. "That voice," he stammered. "I think it was Thompson." Thompson, one of his ARVN buddies, had disappeared with a recon team last month along this very border. Officially, they were MIA. Unofficially, people said they were captured or dead. But hearing that voice, it was like hearing a ghost on the radio. Ellis's eyes were huge. Ramirez clutched his rosary so hard I thought it might snap. I struggled to keep my voice steady. Maybe it's a trick. Viet Cong recordings like the ghost tape. My words rang hollow. The voice didn't sound like a fabricated psyop. It sounded real, drenched in terror. Walker was tight-lipped. He ordered Nguyen to change frequencies and ordered us to get some rest. "We move at first light," he said. "Forget the radio." Forget it? How could we? As I lay back against my pack, I realized my hands were trembling. In the distance, a monsoon thunderhead rumbled, but the sky above was clear. I listened to the darkness, half expecting to hear that voice again out of thin air. Instead, I heard something else, a muffled crack of undergrowth. My eyes snapped open. "Yuba!" I whispered. Our scout spot was empty, the lean-to flap swaying. He was gone. Heart pounding, I nudged Ramirez and we fanned out, waking the others in silence. Yuba's footprints led away from camp, deeper into the jungle. Nguyen pointed. There on a sapling branch hung the little feather and bone charm he'd placed for protection, torn and smeared with what looked like mud or blood. We followed the tracks another 20 yards until they just stopped. No sign of struggle, no drops of blood beyond the charm, nothing. We called his name in low voices, no answer. It was as if the darkness itself had reached up and pulled him under. Captain Walker exhaled slowly. "He's gone. We can't waste time." Back to camp. Double watch, I couldn't believe it. 2 men missing now. One unknown soldier's voice on the radio, and our own scout vanished without a sound. And Walker acted like it didn't matter. Ellis grabbed my sleeve, whispering, "Sarge, what if he just ran?" Locals get jumpy. Maybe he bailed. But I saw the doubt in his eyes. We all felt it. Something was terribly wrong here. I remembered Yiba's warning. Bad place, angry souls. As we huddled back at camp, no one slept. Nguyen quietly translated a prayer under his breath. In the faint glow of the dying fire, I saw Captain Walker writing in a small notebook, face blank. I wondered what kind of inventory he was keeping out here in the dark. Gray dawn brought a clinging fog that turned the jungle into a waking nightmare. Every twisted root looked like a grasping hand. Every distant bird cry like a human scream. We pressed on, exhausted and spooked. The coordinates from our orders led toward an old French outpost called Camp Le Roland, abandoned years ago after the First Indochina War. My map showed it just over the next ridge. During the night, our radio had picked up nothing more, only an occasional burst of static. Captain Walker had forbidden any further calls. "Not why we're here," he snapped, but I caught him rubbing his temples when he thought we weren't looking, as if that disembodied voice had burrowed into his mind too. We emerged from the tree line onto a strangely open stretch of ground, flat grassy hillocks where the jungle had been cleared long ago. "This is it," I whispered. Through the morning mist, I saw the outline of a derelict airstrip and collapsed huts overtaken by vines. The abandoned French airfield was silent now, nothing like the busy staging ground it must have been in the 50s. Walker held up a hand to halt us. Observe and report only, he reminded. Those were the standing orders from higher anytime we encountered something beyond our mission. If we saw unexpected activity, we were to radio it in and stand by. But before we could do anything, the silence was broken by the thump of rotors. A helicopter. It came low over the trees from the south. A UH-1 Huey, olive drab, unmarked. We scrambled into the brush and watched as it hovered and two figures fast roped down to the far end of the old airstrip. The chopper peeled away without landing. The figures began jogging towards us through the fog. We raised our weapons, uncertain. They emerged 10 yards off. Americans, or at least wearing our fatigues. But no unit patches, faces streaked with camouflage paint, each carrying a silenced pistol and an M16. One of them, a tall, gaunt man with icy eyes, stepped forward. "Captain Walker?" he asked quietly. Walker nodded. The man flashed a terse smile. "Orders from Saigon. We're joining you." He didn't offer a name, and his companion remained silent, eyes hidden behind dark glasses, even in the haze. Something about them set my teeth on edge. They weren't regular army, that was clear. CIA, MACV-SOG. Whatever they were, they had the look of men who operate in the shadows. Corporal Nguyen glanced at me uneasily. No one likes surprises, and these two felt like bad surprises. They carried themselves like predators, sliding into another pack's territory. "Any further instructions?" Walker asked. The gaunt one shook his head. "Just to ensure success," he said evenly. "Let's move." With that, he walked right past us and took point. Walker followed without protest. I shared a look with Ramirez. Guardians, I thought, or executioners. Vogel's whisper from another war echoed in my mind. "We're not guarding cargo. We're guarding secrets." Only now we might be the cargo, I realized, and these men were here to make sure we delivered ourselves. We skirted the edge of the airstrip. Through the mist, I could make out rusted fuel barrels and a faded French tricolor painted on a crumbling wall. The place had a heavy stillness, like even the birds avoided it. The two newcomers signaled us to halt. The gaunt leader pointed ahead to a low concrete bunker, half sunken in earth. The old command post, perhaps. Its door hung ajar. "Your missing equipment's likely in there," he said. I caught a hint of something in his tone, almost a dark amusement. Walker motioned us forward. Our boots squelched in mud as we approached the bunker. I smelled it then, a sickly sweet odor that made my stomach churn. It seeped from the dark doorway like a rotting exhale. Ramirez gagged. "Jesus, what is that?" Ellis whispered, pulling his bandana over his nose. I knew that smell from long ago in another jungle. Death and lots of it. My pulse quickened. We formed up, weapons ready, and on Walker's nod, I pushed the heavy door fully open. Light from outside spilled in, and I wish it hadn't. The bunker was a charnel house. Bodies, dozens of them, lay piled across the floor in twisted heaps. I stepped back involuntarily, bile burning my throat. They weren't fresh kills. These were in advanced decay, skin sloughing off bone. Some wore tattered civilian clothes, women, children even. Others had the remnants of NVA uniforms. Flies buzzed in clouds. In the center of the corpses stood a metal crate on its side, its contents spilled out. Canisters with yellow markings, one cracked open. A dark, oily residue stained the floor around it, eating into the concrete. I recognized the chemical insignia, and my heart dropped into a cold void. Nerve agent. The realization hit just as Ellis made a strangled noise and staggered out, retching. Ramirez started praying in Spanish under his breath. I forced myself to take a step inside, covering my mouth with a sleeve. Among the dead, I spotted a familiar face, or what was left of it. A U.S. Army uniform hanging off a decayed frame. The name patch, bleached by death, read, Thompson. My vision swam. Thompson. The voice on the radio begging for help. He was here, dead with the rest, eyes two vacant holes staring upward. Before I could react, a flash and crack exploded beside me. Ramirez had fired his rifle in shock, a reflexive squeeze. The bullet pinged off the bunker wall. "Hold fire," I shouted, but it was too late. In the confined space, the gunshot was like a thunderclap, and it woke something. From beneath the corpses came a noise, a wet, bubbling moan unlike anything human. Ramirez screamed and stumbled backward. I saw, or thought I saw, a hand claw upward from beneath the heap of bodies, fingers black with rot. For one impossible moment, it seemed the dead were stirring. a collective shudder passing through the pile. Ramirez lost it. He rushed forward, babbling about, "No more ghosts, no more." And in 2 strides, he had lifted his rifle toward the largest canister. "No!" I cried out, lunging to stop him. But a single sharp pop rang out. Ramirez jerked, a neat red hole between his eyes, and collapsed atop the bodies he'd been about to shoot. Behind him stood the gaunt newcomer, pistol raised. A wisp of smoke curled from its suppressor. Everything froze. My ears rang. Ramirez's blood was spattered across the crate and the crumbling wall. Ellis was screaming now, a thin, keening wail of terror and rage. "You killed him! You!" He didn't get to finish. Captain Walker swung the butt of his rifle into Ellis's jaw, dropping the young private to the ground unconscious. The gaunt man surveyed the scene with cold eyes. The other newcomer stepped into the bunker doorway, blocking the light, his pistol drawn on me now. Walker's voice came out eerily calm. "Stand down, Sergeant." I stood over Ramirez's lifeless body, hands raised slightly, heart hammering. "Why?" was all I could choke out. The gaunt man answered, tone flat. "He was compromising the mission. We can't allow any wildcards." His gaze drifted pointedly to Ellis's limp form and then to me. I understood. Ramirez panicked and got a bullet. If any of us stepped out of line, we'd get the same. My mouth was dry as sand. "Sir," I addressed Walker hoarsely. "What is this? What happened here?" I gestured at the nightmare surrounding us. Walker's eyes were distant. "The equipment we came to destroy," he said quietly. "VX gas. We had an unsanctioned trial here months ago. Locals, POWs. Loose ends." His voice faltered for the first time. "The brass wanted to see if it could flush out enemy tunnels. They never expected." He trailed off. I felt like I might vomit. An unsanctioned trial. He meant a chemical weapon test on human subjects. Civilians, prisoners, our own allies left to die. And Thompson's team? Walker swallowed. "They stumbled on it, like we just did." Saw too much. His eyes hardened again. "That's why we're here. To clean up everything." My blood ran cold. The missing boots, the distress call. Thompson and his men found this horror and probably tried to get out with evidence. They never made it. A low sound echoed in the bunker, like gas hissing or a sigh from a dozen mouths. The smell of death grew overpowering. The gaunt man holstered his smoking pistol and motioned to his partner. "Time to finish the job," he said. They pulled out thermite charges from their packs. I counted 4, enough to turn everything inside to ash and molten metal. "What about them?" I nodded to Thompson, and the other dead Americans jumbled in with the civilians. Some still had agonized expressions locked on their faces. Walker didn't meet my eyes. "There were never any Americans here, Sergeant. You know that." Anger and nausea warred within me, but training kept me still. We had walked into a moral abyss, a cover-up built on murder, and we were expected to add to the pile of corpses and walk away silent, or not walk away at all. I thought of Ramirez's sudden execution, of Yeba vanishing, of that desperate radio call. Secrets destroyed men, and I could see we were just the next ones to be destroyed. The 2 newcomers dragged Ramirez's body unceremoniously onto the pile and began arming the thermite charges among the corpses. Ellis lay groaning at the doorway, coming to with a broken jaw. Corporal Nguyen and I exchanged a glance. His eyes were full of fear and fury. "When those go off," he whispered, "this place will be an inferno." I knew he was right, and thermite would leave nothing recognizable. No evidence, no remains. Walker had stepped back out into the fresh air, as if he couldn't stand the stench any longer. The gaunt man checked his watch. 2 minutes, we're live, he said, setting the last charge atop the cracked canister. The other spook prodded Ellis to his feet and half dragged him away from the bunker. Nguyen and I were the last inside. As I turned to follow, a soft noise stopped me. From the pile of the dead, I heard it clearly. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate, echoing in the concrete tomb. My heart seized. Nguyen's face went pale as chalk. He had heard it too. The knocks came again, resonating from the very floor beneath us, as if something under the bunker was demanding our attention. My mind raced. Beneath? The radio call. They're here with us. Beneath? Thompson had been trying to say beneath something. I realized the concrete under my boots was slightly raised, a false floor. There was another chamber below. "Sergeant, move out!" Walker yelled from outside, but I couldn't. Summoning courage or madness, I heaved aside 2 bodies and uncovered a trap door secured with an iron ring. The knock sounded once more, louder, urgent. I grasped the ring and pulled. With a screech, the hatch lifted, revealing a narrow shaft and iron rungs leading down into darkness. Foul air rushed up, and over that, an awful keening wail. In the pit below, I saw movement, human shapes, glinting eyes reflecting the dawn light. Survivors. Somehow, impossibly, survivors. Wounded NV soldiers and villagers who had fled into an underground crawl space when the gas was released. They had escaped immediate death, sealed in by the same trap door that kept the gas out. But by now they were little more than living corpses themselves. A gaunt face of a woman lifted toward me, eyes filmed white, teeth bared in a rictus of pain. A hand clawed weakly at the ladder. They had been knocking, begging for release. Thompson's team must have missed this chamber, or been unable to help before they were killed. My vision swam as I realized the depth of horror. These people had been dying down there for days or weeks, trapped in the dark with the bodies of their families, slowly succumbing to poison or starvation, and we nearly just burned them alive. I shouted hoarsely, "There are survivors!" and reached down, grabbing the first trembling, skeletal figure under the arms. It was a little girl, barely 10, skin clammy and eyes rolled back. I hauled her up. Nguyen snapped out of his shock and helped, calling in Vietnamese to the others below. A young man coughing blood struggled upward. We managed to pull 2, 3 people out into the bunker. I could see more moving feebly in the shadows below, but time was almost up. Captain Walker burst back into the doorway, weapon raised. He took in the scene, us hauling out the victims, and his face twisted in alarm and rage. "Abort that, Sergeant!" "That's an order," he barked. I ignored him, lifting the limp body of the girl into Nguyen's arms. "They're coming with us," I snarled. Walker stepped forward, rifle leveled at my chest. "Negative. No survivors. No witnesses." His finger hovered on the trigger. Behind him, the 2 CIA men rushed back, confusion flashing across their stoic masks for once. Walker's voice dropped, cold and deadly. "We finish what we started. We bury it." A memory flashed. Reiner's voice from my nightmares. "We bury it." I realized Walker had no intention of letting anyone out of here alive. Not even us. Whether by thermite or a bullet or a convenient enemy ambush, this mission was a one-way trip. They hadn't sent us to rescue or retrieve. They'd sent us to wipe it all out, then vanish. Ghosts erasing ghosts. Nguyen placed the girl gently against the wall and stood, fury in his eyes. "Sir, you can't," he began. The gaunt agent cut him off, pistol already aimed. "Yes, we can." The air was taut as a drawn wire. The surviving villagers moaned softly on the floor, oblivious to the standoff. My own hands were raised, one still slick with blood from pulling them out. "Captain," I said carefully, "these people, some are kids." "This is wrong." Walker flinched as if struck, sweat beading on his brow. For a moment his facade cracked. "You think I don't know that?" he hissed. "It should never have happened. But we have to contain it. For the greater good." His eyes were desperate, almost pleading. "Orders are orders. We can't let this spread. If the world finds out." An abrupt beep from the detonator cut him off. 2 minutes had elapsed. "Get down!" the CIA operative shouted. In that split second of distraction, I grabbed the little girl off the ground and ran for the door. Nguyen did the same with another survivor, sprinting out behind me. Walker's voice roared, "Stop them!" But it was too late. I barreled past, feeling a searing heat at my back as the first thermite charge ignited. In the open air, I dove behind a berm of dirt and roots, clutching the child against my chest. Nguyen skidded beside me, shielding the dazed young man he'd carried. The bunker went up in an incandescent blaze, white-orange flames shooting out the doorway and vents. A sound like a great hiss filled the clearing as metal melted and decades of secrets burned. I heard screams, some maybe from those left inside, some from human voices. Ellis had regained consciousness enough to scramble away from the inferno. He cowered not far from us. Of Walker and the CIA men, I saw no sign through the billowing smoke and showers of sparks. Hot air whooshed over us, and I pressed the girl's face into my shoulder so she wouldn't breathe the toxic fumes. The jungle itself seemed to wail, as if the land was finally protesting the weight of so much death. When the blast came, it didn't sound like an explosion. It sounded like the earth screaming. A secondary charge must have hit something volatile below. The ground shuddered, and a geyser of dirt, concrete, and flame erupted where the bunker had stood. The shock waves slapped us flat. My vision blanked out in white. For a moment I felt nothing. No sound, no pain, just a weightless sensation, as if hovering between life and death. Then reality came crashing back in a cascade of ringing ears, acrid smoke, and the taste of blood. I pushed myself up, dizzy. A crater smoldered where the bunker had been. The explosion had collapsed the remaining structure into a smoking hole. Burning debris was scattered across the old airstrip. The little girl in my arms stirred and began to cry softly, a thin, rasping cry that cut through the ringing in my ears. I was alive. Somehow, impossibly alive. Nguyen groaned nearby, covered in ash but moving. He still clutched the now unconscious young man who we'd saved. A few yards beyond, Private Ellis was crawling on all fours, a trickle of blood from his ears. Aside from us and the two survivors we pulled out, nothing else moved. I staggered to my feet, adrenaline surging. There was no sign of Captain Walker. Where he'd stood moments before was a heap of smoking rubble. The two CIA agents had been closer to the blast. They were simply gone, perhaps buried in the rubble or blown to pieces. It crossed my mind that maybe in his own twisted way, Walker had intended this outcome all along. Bury the secret, bury himself with it, a final atonement. But I had no time to dwell. The roar of the explosion would draw attention. Friendlies, enemies, it didn't matter. We had to get out before either arrived, because we belonged to neither side. I helped Nguyen up and checked the survivors. The girl's eyes were open but glassy, her small body shivering. I quickly swaddled her in my torn jacket. The young man coughed weakly, alive but barely. Ellis had gotten to his feet, one hand pressed to his head. He looked at me in confusion and fear. "Sarge, what do we do?" he croaked. He was the only other American left from our squad. I glanced down at the crater, where flickers of flames licked out of the pit and smoke curled upward. In that rising smoke, I swore I saw shapes, silhouettes of dozens of figures, standing and watching us. They seemed to hover at the edge of the crater, then fade into the sky. My heart clenched. Perhaps it was just swirling ash and debris playing tricks on my eyes. Or perhaps it was the spirits Iba spoke of, finally released. Either way, we could not linger. I grabbed Ellis by the shoulder. "We get these people to safety," I said. My voice firmed up as the senior man now. "Then we tell someone what happened here." Nguyen gave a bitter laugh. "Who will believe us? We're not even supposed to be here." He was right, of course, but we had to try. We gathered what little gear survived, a half-burned map, a canteen, a few magazines of ammo, and slipped back into the tree line, supporting the stumbling survivors. We trekked east toward Vietnam, skirting known enemy routes and praying the morning light and smoke hadn't drawn a PAVN patrol. Every step was agony. We were bruised, half deaf, half blind with exhaustion, but fear kept us moving. A few hours later, the jungle gave way to a battered dirt road. As we prepared to cross it, a cry went up from Ellis. "Chopper!" In the distance, the thump of rotor blades. Our hearts sank. Likely NVA or Khmer Rouge. Any encounter would be our end. But I caught sight of the helicopter through the canopy. It was American, a Huey, sweeping low, perhaps searching for the source of the explosion. Ellis fired a 3-round burst into the air, our last risky gamble. The Huey turned our way. Within minutes, it was hovering overhead. I saw door gunners aiming nervously, unsure who we were. I waved my arms frantically, signaling with our radio code. Eventually, they set down in a nearby clearing. It was a medevac bird that happened to be flying back from a canceled pickup. The crew's eyes widened at the sight of us. A filthy American sergeant, a stunned private, a South Vietnamese corporal, and two emaciated Cambodian civilians, all emerging from the forbidden side of the border. We were too ragged for them to even guess our unit. They hauled us aboard without a word. As the Huey lifted off, I looked back at the jungle, endless and inscrutable. I wondered how many bones it held, how many secrets. The wind from the rotors flattened the grass and stirred the tree leaves, almost like a sigh of relief, or a warning. They separated us as soon as we landed at the forward base. Nguyen and the two survivors were rushed to a medical tent. I glimpsed MPS ushering Ellis away, his face blank. An intelligence officer with tired eyes took me into a bunker for debrief. I told the truth, the whole truth in a raw stream. The mission, the ghosts on the radio, the boots in the jungle, Iba vanishing, the bunker of bodies, the chemical test, the betrayal. The officer's face was unreadable. He recorded everything, asked a few pointed questions, then left me sitting under guard for what felt like hours. When he returned, he brought a medic who wordlessly jabbed a needle into my arm. A warm fog filled my head. The rest of that day slid in and out of focus. Fragments of loud voices, someone yelling that I was delusional, possibly under enemy influence. At one point, I was on a stretcher watching the jungle sky pass overhead. At another, I was in a hospital bed with an IV, staring at the ceiling. A colonel with cold stars on his collar visited me. He spoke calmly, sympathetically, informing me that my squad had been killed by enemy action and I was found wandering disoriented across the border. I tried to argue to tell him about Walker and the bunker, but my tongue felt leaden. "You inhaled some unknown gases out there," he said, patting my shoulder. "It's given you nightmares." Best not to dwell on them. My protest slurred into mumbling. The colonel took a file from an aide and held it up. "Top secret," it read. "Operation Ghost Patrol." I could barely focus my eyes, but I caught a paragraph. It was a fabricated account of our mission, claiming we encountered a Viet Cong ambush at an empty camp. Nothing about survivors, chemicals, CIA. Only heroic language about how Captain Walker and others died bravely. The colonel slid the file back into his briefcase. "This never leaves the vault," he said almost kindly. "Just like you never went to Cambodia." He leaned in, his breath smelling of menthol. "Sign the papers when you're lucid. That'll send you home. War's over for you, Sunhome. I never thought I'd survive to see it." Maybe I hadn't in a way. I signed whatever they wanted. Within a week, I was on a transport plane, medically evacuated for psychiatric evaluation. They stamped honorable discharge on my papers, and that was that. Ellis and Nguyen. I never saw them again. I heard Nguyen was quietly reassigned. Ellis, he disappeared into the VA hospital system with combat fatigue. The two Cambodian survivors did not fare much better. Officially, they were listed as enemy civilians, detained briefly, then who knows? Perhaps they were returned to a refugee camp, or perhaps someone made sure their silence too was permanent. The war ground on for 5 more years. I watched from afar as our nation tried to forget it, but some things won't be forgotten. Years later, long after Saigon fell, I caught wind of a news report, an investigative piece called Valley of Death. It claimed that during a secret mission in Laos, U.S. forces had used sarin nerve gas and committed terrible crimes. For one electrifying moment, I thought the truth I carried was finally coming to light. But almost as quickly, the report was retracted under intense pressure. The journalists were discredited, the allegations dismissed as fantasy. I sat in my dim living room, watching the TV screen as a Pentagon spokesman declared, "There was no nerve gas, no ghost mission. It's all a myth." My hands shook with rage. A myth, like the Nazi gold train, like all the convenient legends that bury inconvenient truths. They had buried our story just as surely as we buried those bodies in that bunker. Decades passed. Officially, nothing happened at Camp Le Roland in March 1970. If you ask the records, Captain Walker and my squad never existed. Yet sometimes, late at night, I wake in a sweat, ears straining for a sound that won't fade. Knock, knock, knock. In those moments, I swear I hear the echoes of that jungle. The ghostly taps, the crackle of a phantom radio, the whisper of wandering souls that were never laid to rest. I hear Ramirez's muttered prayers, Nguyen's haunted silence, Ellis's sobs. I hear the voices of the dead, Thompson and his men, the villagers, calling out from under years of denial. The past doesn't rest. It rots, it festers, and it waits. If you're reading this, then one of my hidden journals has found its way to you. I wrote everything down, every detail, and scattered the copies like seeds, hoping one day truth might take root. Maybe you'll be the one to believe me. Maybe not. Either way, I have kept my promise. I didn't let them bury it completely. People still talk in hushed tones about missing soldiers, about ghost patrols lost to the jungle, about secret missions erased from the books. Most shrug it off as just another war tale, just superstition. But I know somewhere in Cambodia, near the border, the land still remembers. Locals avoid the clearing where the old airfield was. Some say on certain nights you can hear crying on the wind or see lights hovering where the runway used to be. They call it the Valley of Screams, or so I've heard. Others don't call it anything at all. They've simply learned to stay away. The ground there was so poisoned that nothing grows even now. It's as if the earth itself refuses to cover what we did. So here is my confession, my testament, my warning. There are things buried in that jungle that no one will ever dig up. Things far more terrifying than any treasure or weapon. If you ever find yourself out there by the old Le Roland site and the night falls deathly quiet, listen carefully. If you hear 3 knocks in the dark or a faint voice crying for help on a radio that isn't there, don't answer. Turn away and leave that cursed ground in peace. Because some ghosts, once awakened, never stop knocking. And some secrets, no matter how deep you entomb them, will claw their way back to the surface, demanding to be heard. They call it just another legend now. A ghost patrol that never officially existed. A story muttered around campfires by those who feel the chill in their spine, but laugh it off in daylight. The Pentagon has its version. The history books have none at all. But I have mine. I lived it. I carry it every night when the knocks come in my dreams. The truth of that mission was buried by bureaucrats and lies, but it still lives, raw and angry, beneath the silence. Some nights I imagine Captain Walker standing at the edge of my bed, his face half gone from the blast, whispering, "Orders are orders." Other nights I see Yi Ba, eyes accusatory, and I wonder if the jungle took him as a mercy. In the end, maybe the ghosts are the lucky ones. They at least know what justice they seek, a name, a recognition, a memory. We, the living, stumble on, trying to pretend the nightmares aren't real. But I know better. The war may have ended, the papers may be signed, the files locked away, yet out there the past lingers, unquiet, unburied. History isn't done with us. If you're still here, if you've read this far, then you've heard my story. The next chapter now lies with you. Tell others or keep it to yourself. Believe it or call it madness. But if you ever smell a sweet metallic scent on a humid night or catch a snippet of ghostly Vietnamese on your static radio, remember what I said. In those shadows, the truth is breathing. The ghosts of the war are still on patrol, knocking from beneath the weight of time, waiting for someone, anyone, to listen. Don't let them knock forever.